Thanks again for sharing that. Thanks so much. Well, we're blessed to have Pastor Art bring us a message again today. Pastor Henry is well on our way, and it's good that God sends someone else to fill that bill. So, Brother Art.
Praise the Lord. First, I want to give my honor to God and thank Him for everything He's done in my life. I ask Him to lead me each and every day. Honor the pastor and his wife who are away right now, and I said God will protect them and keep them and their family. And I'd like to honor my wife as well, who was here with me this day. And a good friend Richard came out to see me today, so it was blessed. Lord, I want to first ask that you keep us and protect us and keep us for your glory, Lord. Open up our minds' understanding. Give us peace and safety in our hearts to be willing to listen and hear your word. Take me from self. Speak through me.
Amen.
And allow us to be able to reach somebody else, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Today's subject today, I'm going to try to get through on time. Facing your giants. Focus on giants, you stumble. If you focus on God, your giants tumble. Anyone ever hear that?
Yes.
All right, so the idea is, if you're focusing on your fears, what's going to happen? You're going to stumble. You're going to continue to keep falling through these cracks. But if you focus on God, your giants tumble. We move to the next one. What is the secret of victory? Most of the time, our giants become a situation in our life. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that, and hopefully you get something out of it, as I have as well. But a lot of things that happen that disconnect from us are the things that we cannot control. And they are bigger than us if we see it in our physical. All right, let's move to the next one. Facing your giants, facing impossible challenges to conquer. We know that the Bible talks a lot about David against Goliath, Gideon against the Midianites, Moses against Pharaoh. Each situation God conquered for those who put their faith in him. So everything that we talk about is faith. Each situation in our Bible and our characters are placed in there for us to be encouraged with faith. Each person in this situation here that had to endure those trials and tribulations struggled themselves in faith. But it took time and building. Let's move to the next one. But God promises in his word that we already have the victory in Christ. So we want to get ourselves to a place where we are in victory. Let's move to the next. How do we defeat the giants in our lives? Faith doesn't always seem to be the best option. Because it's easy to hear somebody say, hey, have faith when you're going through something. We're going to believe that God's going to get you through. You ever hear that from somebody? And when you're going, all right, because you want to have it, you want it bad, but just hearing those words, sometimes you need it, but sometimes you don't feel it. But we see that faith is the only option that will really bring us true victory. Remember, we're trying to build ourselves to victory. And if we don't learn how to manage how we take in and believe and trust God, we're going to continue to struggle. Let's move to the next one. We're going to talk today a little bit about David and Goliath, the challenges that Goliath brought to the Israelites. So I'd like to read from 1 Samuel 17. There's a lot of information here, but it's going to be relevant to where we're going today. I'm going to try to breeze through a lot of this and get through some important scriptures here, verses. But I want to give you anybody familiar with David and Goliath? Okay, it's a famous story that we've all heard. Everyone has a different interpretation if you don't get yourself back into reading where the scripture is taking us to. So 1 Samuel 17, I'm going to jump into, just to give you an outline. Saul was the king of the Israelites at the time, and the Philistines were going to attack them. All right, so they had themselves a major guy, a big man in their camp. which made everyone afraid. But when I read the scripture, it'll give you a little more of an insight on where we're going. All right. Saul, counted by gathering, this is in 1 Samuel number 2, verse 2, gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Eli. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills, with the valley between them. Then Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the ranks of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore a bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as the weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. Goliath stood out, taunted across the Israelites. "Why are you coming out to fight?" he called. "I am a Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me." Anyone ever face any bullies in their lives? Someone that can stand up to them? Or a challenge that continues to tell you that you can't make it through?
Yeah.
All right? "If he kills me," Goliath said, "then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Now we're down to verse 11. Can we move this slide there? So our first problem we see is Goliath, the giant. Our first problem is the problems that we have involved in our own lives. That's how we see it. The only thing we see in our physical is what's in front of us. Okay? So now we have to get through the rest of this here to see how this ends. All right. Now David was the son of a man named Jesse. All right? Jesse's from Bethlehem, land of Judah. Jesse was an old man at the time. He had 8 sons. Right? Jesse's 3 oldest sons had already joined Saul's army. So they were in there for the battle. David, of course, was the youngest. 3 older brothers stayed with Saul's army. I initially wanted to read it, but I forgot that I wanted to read it. But that's all right. But David went back and forth so he could help his father with sheep in Bethlehem. Okay, so David was the youngest son, helping out on the farm with his father, while the older brothers were a lot older, obviously, to be able to be in the army. All right, David was a young teenager at the time. For 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite armies. 40 days. So that's a month and how many days? 10? Month and 10 days. And I can only think about some of the challenges I've had in trying to get through that next month, not knowing if I'm going to make it through this next month. You know, sometimes not knowing if I'm going to make it through the week. All right, so this is 40 days of that challenge there. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to our brothers. And give these 10 cuts of cheese to the captain. See how your brothers are getting along and bring back a report on how they are doing." So his father was obviously concerned, but he wanted to bless his sons to encourage them, and he wanted David to be the runner-up to go back and forth, coming back. Check on the brothers. This is how they're doing. They're struggling. They're afraid, right? David's brothers were with Saul, the Israelite army, the valley of Eli, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. So the army was leaving strong and powerful, ready to go. That's what it sounds like to me, right? They were going with shouts and cries. We're gonna defeat this. We're gonna overcome. This is the full army, right? Soon, Israelite and Philistine forces stood face to face, facing each other. David left the things with the keeper. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. And supplies, hurried out to the ranks to meet his brothers. As he was talking to them, Goliath, the Philistine champion of Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. This is the same guys that were marching out going, we're ready to battle, right? As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. So what happened then? Because this is one person, one problem. Right? They were ready to battle the Philistine camp. But they had one big guy that stood in the way and said, I'll take on anybody. And they all began to run. Have you seen the giant? The men asked. He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and that man's entire family will be exempt from paying taxes. And you tell me there wasn't one person in there that was bold enough? The taxes alone would have said, hey, I'm going to take a shot at this one. Right? All right, David asked the soldiers standing nearby, what will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? I'm reading from the New Living Translation if anyone wants to know. And these men gave David the same reply. They said, yes, that is the reward for killing him. What was the reward? One of his daughters, Saul's daughters, and taking care of his bills, right? All right. But when David's oldest brother, Eli, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. What are you doing around here anyway? His little brother, right? He demanded, what about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. So like any little brother tagging along, you want to keep him in a safe place. That's more probably what he was dealing with at the time. But it was like, why are you getting into this? Because now what you're seeing is you're seeing me exposed. I don't want you to see me exposed. I need you to go back and tend to those little sheep, right? That's how he called it. What have I done now? David replied. I was only asking a question like a little brother would, right? He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. So David was, would you say he was nosy? Or he just wanted to get into it, right? I want to know what's going on, all right? Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I will fight him. So this is little teenage Saul, David, right? Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. So he's saying, this guy's been doing push-ups, working out, walking around looking buff for all his life. And here you are, this little puny little guy, talking about you can take it. All right? I go after it with a club. Oh, I missed something. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. He said, when a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. Now, this is a strong little guy, right? He somehow, somewhere along the line, built up his confidence and said, I'm not afraid. That's really what he's saying. Because I've taken on a lion and a bear. All right? I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it again to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. So David had a lot of faith as a child. You ever notice somebody that you just can't figure out how they just keep moving forward? And they just seem so strong in their faith, even though their circumstances seem to be falling down. Do you ever want to get to that place? Okay. the Lord who rescued me from the claws of a lion and bear will rescue me from the Philistine. He believed that. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. Can you imagine that? It was probably big on him, you know. And what do you think Saul was really thinking? He's not going to make it anyway, right? But to amuse myself, why don't we just go ahead? I can't go in these, he protested Saul. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again, all right? He picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with a shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at the ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog? He roared at David, that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. So Goliath seemed a little offended now. You got all these men in the army that he know he can bully, but now you send a little kid to me with no armor, and here I am, I'm the big guy, right? Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals, Goliath yelled. David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, and the God of the armies, Israel, whom you have defied. So he was going, when it appeared that he was just going as this little kid, not being able to be strong enough. But he was going in faith because he says, I'm coming with God's army. And when we put our faith in God, we don't see what's around us. Because God says, trust me. Remember we talked about the storm last time. When it's just whirling around us, it's really not. We're affected because we can't see. But if we send ourselves into that imaginary place and say, God, I need you to take me through, you'll find yourself moving along. Might be a little slow, but moving along because God's army is protecting you. All right. See where I left off at. All right. David replied to the Philistine, today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. What a bad little boy, right? And then I will give you the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Right? I don't want to say there's a disclosure because our young people need to know that God is real in our lives. Amen? All right? And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. See? So we say, we got to get through our problems. We got to get 2, 3, 4 jobs to get through our situations. What did David say? Not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. All right? As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. I want you to remember that. So we see the battle. We see the stronghold in front of us. And Goliath standing there strong. And I remember this because I had a guy in school that was a real big guy. For some reason, this guy did not like me. And he was so bad that I played basketball sometimes in the gym. And playing full court, he'd take the big weights from the other side of the gym and stand on the sidelines lifting these big heavy weights that no one else could lift. And I'd mess up. I'd sit in the bleachers at the top. He'd come all the way at the bottom of the bleachers and start lifting weights, looking up at me and dropping them in front of me. And it was like nobody else saw this going on. And whenever I would mention it, they go, oh, he's a big teddy bear. It's a strange thing. You know, and I needed God to help me out in that situation. All right, so make sure we don't lose ourselves again. All right, David ran out to meet him. Okay, that's why I needed to read it. All right. Reaching into a shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in. First shot, right? And Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. So they want us to remember that. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from his sheath. David used it to kill him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, what do you think they did? They turned and ran. Wow, ain't that something? They turned and ran. So we go back to that situation with me in school. It was the same thing. I had to pray, because I came from a praying mom, and I knew. I didn't tell her that, because she always say, stand up and fight your battles. But I was fortunate enough to be blessed around people that protected me. And I said it to one guy. And I remember the day when I knew it was getting ready to come down. And this guy was walking towards me. He said, today is the day. I remember him saying that to me. And I jumped up on my feet. We were sitting in our spots in the gym. And everybody was jumping. Oh, man, it's going to be a fight. I knew it wasn't going to be a fight. But I knew if I ran, that would be it. And I threw my hands up. And then I had that one person that came in and called his name. And said, hey, that's family. We weren't really family. But he was saying, don't mess with him. So that gentleman is a good friend of mine to this day, and a Christian brother as well. And he didn't realize that at that time God was using him to be my protector at that time. And that was enough to change that whole situation around. Then the men of Israel and Judah gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines. Did you hear what just happened? Remember, they ran. Now, all of a sudden, they're rushing after them, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead were wounded. Most finished reading. Philistines were strewn all around the road of Sharon, as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. What does that say about people when you push through something and all of a sudden, when they're friends, when everything is going right? I'm going through a struggle, I need you to pray for me. Oh, we'll pray for you, and then they start to back off. But then when you overcome, all of a sudden they're back in with you. That's how I perceive this. You had the power, and had you trusted in God with me, we could have all went in there. When the attack should have been when they ran, you see me go after Goliath, you guys should have went after the rest of the men. We could have been got this over with, but you waited to see what was going to happen. And then when you realize a little boy was able to do this, that little guy that you didn't think was going to make it, that guy that lost everything, became the one in front. Okay? So that's how we've been looking at things. All right. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered, right? David took the Philistines' head to Jerusalem, but he stored the man's armor in his own tent. As Saul watched David go out to fight the Philistines, he asked Abner, the commander of his army, Abner, whose son is this young man? You think he would have asked that earlier on, right? Because he wasn't really concerned at the time. He didn't believe anything was going to happen. I really don't know, Abner declared. Well, find out who he is, the king told him. As soon as David returned from killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. Wow. Brave little guy, right? Tell me about your father, young man, Saul said. And David replied, his name is Jesse, and we live in Bethlehem. All right, can we move to the next point now? Goliath's height was 6 cubits and a span, approximately 9 foot 6 inches tall. So, our natural is to be afraid of somebody who we know has been building, boxing, doing all this powerlifting, a wrestler, and that big, and he said he's coming after you. All right, let's move to the next one. What's a giant? Something of very great size or force, something that looms large in your life, something huge, intimidating, big. A noun, person, place, thing, or thought. Something too big to conquer in your world. That's what the giant is. So we use David as a reference, but it's the giants in our own lives. Can we move to the next one? Why does God allow giants in our lives? You would think, in our natural sense, that we feel, all right, God, I'm a child of God, all I got to do is spread the word. But why do I have to keep going through challenges? Challenges, storms, and giants. As soon as I get through one, something else comes up. Challenges, storms, and giants. Let's move to the next one. When it's telling you how to feel, how do you know when it's in your life? When it's telling you how to feel. The giant in your life, financial, relationships, telling you how to feel. When it's controlling your emotions. When it's causing your peace to become disruptive. It just won't go away. That feeling inside. We move to the next one. Like the Israelites experienced with Goliath taunting them, your giant is there in the mornings when you wake, right? And it's there when you lay down to go to sleep. You ever feel in that situation? You ever been in that situation where you wake up and you start to pray, but it's that, oh God, please let me get through this day. Let this work out. But it doesn't work out when we want it. And then we're going through the day, not able to eat, right? Disruptive, the peace is not there. People are trying to be happy around you, but you're supposed to be positive. That's the worst when you're supposed to be the one that's the mentor and the positive one, but you're going through something and you're trying your best to get through. All right, let's move to the next one. Your giant might be an addiction, something that has a grip on your life, taunts you daily, someone that may slander your reputation. Talk about you, right? A lawsuit or divorce, or maybe someone that's threatening your life. All right, let's move to the next one. An unbelieving friend who we cared about could be a giant. You know, I just lost a friend. And again, I've had a concern. And the concern is because I'm saddened not knowing if God was in his life. And that's a hard thing because I have to go back and look at what else could I have done, what else could I have said. Right? So God is dealing with me and easing that in my life. It could be a spouse or family member that you're having trouble with. Abandonment, past or present, that we haven't dealt with. Financial, medical, circumstantial. How about the prodigal child? The child that we keep praying for and we don't want to see lost. But it seems like the more and more we try to reach out to them, the further they get away from us. That could be a challenge and a giant in our life that may be setting us back because we're not giving it to God. We're still trying to help and do the second and third and fourth jobs. To say, all right, I'll help you here. We're still calling them and complaining, you know, you need to get yourself together. You need to get yourself together. I'm guilty of doing that myself. We have to say, God, I trust you. I've installed the best I can. And don't fall for, well, if you had did this, I wouldn't be doing this. Okay? Because then that becomes another giant. And you have all these giants standing in front of you because now they're trying to force you. Because that's what the devil does. Okay, let's move to the next one. This is where we come to when we don't trust God fully. We may not hold our hands to our head, but we feel that way. How will I ever overcome this? And I tell you, for us that have lived long, we have overcome a lot. Time. All right, let's move to the next one. Giants want to own your world, shape your emotions, dictate your well-being. Everything we just talked about, that's what they are. They want to overturn everything that you believe in that you've gotten through. Let's move to the next. Bills you can't pay, people you can't please, habits you can't break, failures you can't forget, a future you can't face, a past you can't let go of. Those all become giants in our lives. Okay, let's move it to the next. Look at this one. We all face giants at one time or another. We often try to fight these giants, but they only seem to grow stronger. But in that picture, that little guy is fighting. All right? Now, our natural will say he is not going to win. And I've been in those kind of physical battles. And what made me stronger was walking away knowing that I stood my ground. That was important. But I don't know that until I'm in it. And I can tell you, and I'm not here to boast about my younger athletic fighting skills, but I'll never forget a time when I had 3 gentlemen that came charged at me. And when everyone, the story is, everyone said, man, I didn't know you can fight like that. But what they didn't know, I was trying to run the whole time. I was trying to get away, and every time I turned around, there was another one. And I just fought and fought and fought. And I didn't stay around to see the ending, because when the crowd kind of came in, I was able to get away. But I was kind of like the hero after that. And after you get real boastful if you're not careful. Let's move to the next one. How do we know we're facing giants? It not only intimidates you, but it controls your emotions. Verse 11 says, in 1 Samuel 17, you get a chance to read 17, it's very inspiring. The whole story. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. 24 says, as soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away and fight. We read that out of fear. Let's move to the next one. But just like David, you can face your giant. Even if you aren't the strongest, smartest, best equipped, or the holiest one around, right? We find the answer in the Old Testament with David and Goliath. We move to the next one. David, in verse 26, David asked the soldiers standing by, what will a man get for killing a Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? So what I get out of this verse is that we have to build our confidence. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to stand. Go after your giant. Can you move to the next one? Let's move to the next one, because we've read all of this. This here in 48, as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran to meet him. The question here is, do you know your giant? It's something to think about as you're going through the week. And start to write down. Remember, writing it down makes it plain. Start writing down the areas of where you want to grow. All right? Do you recognize his walk? What he sounds like? How does it make you feel when you're facing those giants? We move to the next one. There's a time when we must begin to grow in our faith. We must change our perspective on how we see things that are standing our way. The Israelites saw the giant, but David saw a man who stood in the way of God's people, God's honor and God's promise. David didn't forget that God brought him out of many circumstances before. He believed that God would never fail him. And that is the key. Remember, every time you go through the next step, remember where God has brought you from. Kind of like the obstacle, but it's really not. It's just walking through. It's walking through life. Let's move to the next one. What is the secret of victory? So now we're moving into that point. Let's go right to the next. The dictionary tells us an act of defeating an enemy, opponent, in battle, game, or competition, like an election, right? Move to the next one. We all have an idea of what it is. Fear is a prison. We know that Goliath is real, but fear is a prison that you put yourself in if you don't stand and say, I'm going to trust God, because you're worried about what's going to happen next. I have to tell myself this all the time. There's times when sometimes I carry a lot sometimes, and because I'm always putting out. I work with young people, and always, even when they don't know what I'm going through, I have to be positive for them. But there's times I find myself backing myself up and getting ready to close the cell, to put myself in it, because I'm going, all right, this is becoming overwhelming. How do I get through? And you have to remember, open up that cell. Throw that key away. All right, let's move to the next one. Giants fall. That's how we get through. You have to know there is hope. And our greatest hope is to be with God. To continue to walk the steps so we are with God. Let's go to the next one. Isaiah 41:10 says, don't be afraid, for I am with you. This is God. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. Don't be afraid. I am with you. God is with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Can we move to the next? To live victorious Christian life, we must first return back to our first love. Yes. We talk about love, and I shared with Sid earlier. I perform with a band outside of here, and I get a chance to hold the microphone. And I find a song where I can say something about God. And the song is a love song. But I do a breakdown and I say, hey, no matter what we're going through, relationships are not going to be our best. But we have to have something that's going to fulfill us. So if you don't have nobody that loves you, if you don't love somebody, we know somebody that will never ever leave you, that will always love you and fulfill every aspect of your life. You know, so that's our job, to be able to share that, and they have to see that. Let's go to the next. What are some examples? A type of personal sin, something that makes you fall again and again. That's another struggle, another giant of the same thing that you find yourself falling back down, that we have to give to God. Fear, pride, envy, prejudice, gluttony, lust, lying. These are setbacks in our spiritual life, in our spiritual walk. So when we're trying to look at, all right, why I keep struggling here, we have to go back and look at some of the things in our own personal lives. Let's move to the next one. What a victory it was for David to boldly defeat a giant Goliath, armed with only a slingshot and 5 smooth stones. The will of the Philistines was broken because their protector, Satan, right? You were able to defeat the demons that he sent after you. The Israelites were given a new energy and strength. And this is what happens when we overcome. We are given that strength that we're supposed to hold each other up to. But continue to be armed, right? And it was all because of a little shepherd boy. Can we move to the next one? Philippians 4:13 tells us that we are all the way up. If we continue to trust God, that's what we're reaching for. And he will hold us. Can we move to the next? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Can we say that together? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's important. When you know that, even when your child has turned away, when you're struggling, you can't reach out to that friend, you can say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Because that's where David got his strength from. Amen? Let's move forward. Deuteronomy 24 says, God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you the victory. Now I want you to know that we hear the battle and we talk a lot about it today. But it's not just the physical battles that we battle. It's the battle in our minds. Okay? That's telling us that we're not able or we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't try this. We have to continue to hold on to God. That's the battle. And God is saying, if you hold on to me, I'll hold on to you. Amen. I'm never leaving you. But it's only you that tries to say, I'm going to fix it. Yeah. Or when you put yourself back into the cage and hide. Okay? We gotta chase down that giant. And don't be afraid. Because the worst that's going to happen is you're going to be with God. And that's not the worst, that's the best. Okay, let's move to the next one. Defeat your giants. Let's go right to the next. Put on the full armor of God. Ephesians 6:11. Can we go right to the next one? We'll read a little bit of this 6:11 and 20. Put on the whole armor of God. I used to do this as a child. My mother had told me to do this. And she said, I want you to go in there. When you read that, read it out loud and act like you're putting these different things on. And it's something to try if you want to start your mornings out. You know, I think I'm going to start trying that again. Just came to me that I remembered I did this. I still remember the room that I used to do it. At first it was foolish, but then I realized I'm reading it out loud. I became powerful. And it was like nothing could stop me that day. All right? Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Move to the next. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. Put that belt of truth on. Having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. I remember I used to put the shoes on and everything. In all circumstances, take up your shield. I used to hold my Bible up when I did that part of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit. Okay? The sword of the Spirit is all spiritual, which is the word of God. Praying at all times in the Spirit. You don't have to walk around going, hey, Lord Jesus, because someone's going to eventually call somebody and have you picked up, right? But pray in the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray all the time in the Spirit, supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me and me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. And Paul wrote this, of course, as he was writing of many of his work and locked up, in a sense. And he was blessed because God, see, even in a sense there, God still used him. Still used the enemy's camp to provide him with the things to write for him. Because I can't do this by myself. Only God. Can we move to the next one? Everything you want is on the other side of what?
Fear.
Say it like you meant it. Everything you want is on the other side of
fear.
All right, move to the next one. Ephesians 6:1. We already read that one. Move on. Fear is a lie. See, what we can't see is that little alley. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, I know I have, where I grew up in Brooklyn, so we've had a lot of times when I wasn't doing right, but I knew to say, all right, Lord, forgive me of all my sins. I have to go down this street. Protect me. And I really believe God protect me. Have you ever experienced walking somewhere and you can feel the presence of evil around you? And you know that God is holding on to you, and you find yourself praying, God, keep me through this. Or in a situation in a car, you ever dozed off while you're driving and realize that God had protected you? Because I know for a fact there was a time when I scraped my car on the side of the barrier I don't know if I shared that story, coming out from a club when I was in my early 20s. And the next day, not knowing that my mirror and the whole side of the car was scratched out. I thought somebody first did it, and I realized God reminded me, you hit that barrier. And had I gone through it, I would have ended up flipping over because the cars going this way were lower, and I was on top, and I would have flipped right over, you know. But that was God protecting me when I didn't know He was protecting me, you know. So let's move to the next one. Fear is a lie. Don't stop believing. Anybody know that song, My Journey?
Yeah.
You ever hear that song and you start feeling good? What about when you're not feeling good and you hear something? Do you turn it off? Do you say, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not feeling good. I don't believe. All right, move to the next one. Put on the whole armor of God, truth, righteousness, gospel of peace, faith, salvation, the word of God. Keep praying. Through it all, Keep praying. Through the trials, the mountains, the storms you face, keep praying. Let's move to the next one. Just about done. Face the giants in your life, slay them, and move on. Do not be daunted by the mistakes and failures in your life. When you get through it, don't hold on to it. You see, a lot of times what we're doing, and I'm guilty of doing this, you get through something, but you keep holding on to that same thing and carrying it with you. You move sometimes from a different state, and you bring that same problem with you. Okay? Sometimes it's physical. And we have to figure out how to do that, because the physical could be our own family. Okay? But the spiritual part, you got to say, I left it in God's hands. Okay, I'm letting you back in for this time, but this is your time frame. God, I need you to do something. I need this boy to have a job. I need this girl to get herself together. I need you to protect my home when I'm not here. Right? Sometimes that's what we have to do. All right? Move on. Let's move to the next one. So what do we learn in this teaching here? One, recognize that we all have giants. We all face severe hardships, obstacles, and temptations. Move to the next. All right, I have a few scriptures here, and then we're done. I want to read them all because I want you to be encouraged, and for those that want to write down. Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. I say this all the time. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Psalms 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold in my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Make it personal. Let's move to the next. Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Romans 8:11. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, hear that? The Holy Spirit. He who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you. That is a wonderful hope. Can we move to the next one? Romans 8:8. I consider that our present sufferings right now are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us. Everything that you're going through, God is going to bless you and reward you if you keep holding on and not giving up. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Every obstacle can be right around us. It's just like that storm. But God is walking us through. And it might take a little bit longer than others, but we're going to make it. Let's move to the next. 2 Corinthians 12:9-10 says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecution, in difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. When I'm weak, I am strong. Because we trust in God, right? Philippians 4:12-13 says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is not to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do this through him who gives me strength. To the next one. So we want victory. Psalm 60:12 says, through God we will have victory, for he will trample down our enemies. God will trample down your enemies if you hold on. Okay? I want to encourage you and thank you for the opportunity to be able to share with you. And unless someone wants prayer, I don't have a problem praying with you. You know, we can close out.
All right, let's stand.
Amen.